Morning, morning, morning. It's early in the morning.
Yes.
Friday morning.
Coffee.
It's writing day. But we wanted to talk a little bit about the conversation that's been going on King Tap music. I asked, how skilled does a musician need to be in music and worship? So I was really surprised at some of the responses that were coming through. And I knew I was going to get some of them, because too general, But I'm really concerned a little bit about the mentality of, of excellence in the music arena in the church. Now, I do get that, some circles, some churches only have what they have.
Yes.
I'll
be right back.
Okay. You're getting he's getting his Bible, his phone. And I get that. Like when we were down in Guatemala on a mission trip, we had a guy with a guitar who knew a few chords, and This was when I was 18. You got what you got, and that's fine. But when you don't just got what you got, then what? It's like, so can we, because of we can accept what you got what you got? Do we lower our standard elsewhere? And I'm also wanting to talk about music in and of itself. It's like, I feel like sometimes we kind of put music as a non-essential. We really don't need it, so we really don't have to be good at it. Everybody can sing, so we'll just sing some choruses. But then I go back into the Bible, and and someone mentioned the Levitical order, and I can't remember how many musicians there were, like 250 something. I can't remember, 400. I can't remember.
There was a lot.
There was a lot.
I can't off the top of my head.
And they had to be really good. They were in with their own little conservatory for years and years, and the expectations were there, and yeah, they were pretty much supported. So I get that too. It's like when you're paid to do something all day. My argument, though, and I'll get into some questions with Rick here, who knows the Bible very well, is that in those days they didn't have the life we have here. If we're called to be a musician, we have a half an hour a day. Turn off the TV for the 4-hour binge that you have every night. You know what I mean? We have bathrooms and water and things to make our life easier. So, I get that we can be busy, but to work on skill, in my observation as a music teacher, the whole worship arena in the church should be much better than it is. I think it's just a lack of discipline. There's some laziness, and then there's a mentality that it's non-essential. So, not that we should be burdened by condemnation, but we should be inspired by the possibilities. Do you see what I'm saying? We should be inspired that what it could be, not burdened by, you shouldn't be, you're a bad person because you don't practice a half an hour a day. Shame doesn't get you anywhere.
All right.
But inspiration does. And the mentality, and the right mentality of discipline. So I want to start with some questions here. Well, generally, what are your thoughts? Because I know you've been reading some of the posts. So what are your initial thoughts before I get into some individual questions? I'm having my morning coffee. It's early.
Well, a lot of, like in the conversations, a lot of them seem to go to an either or, immediately to an either or. Well, I'd rather have a good heart than somebody with talent. And I don't know that, okay, we're going to say God is orchestrating this and God is bringing it together. And what does God have to say about the thing? And I think a good heart is given. For whatever area. I don't care if you're the janitor in the church. You ought to have the heart for it.
Yeah, he doesn't have to have a good heart. He's just cleaning.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. If you're serving the Lord, it's do everything with the utmost of your heart.
Right.
Everything.
To the glory of Him. Right.
So I kind of feel like that's kind of a given that, yeah, that should be there.
Yes, but the question would be, I think where psychologically people are coming from is that, oh, music, you're on the stage ministering to people,
Yeah.
and the janitor is the background. So if they're
You're up front.
yeah.
Yes.
So if you're having problems as a janitor, it's not as, the consequences aren't as much, because I'm just making an argument.
Right.
So maybe if you are struggling with a drug addiction or something, or even offenses towards God, you're cleaning toilets, it's getting done. So I think sometimes the mentality is the importance of being on stage in ministry versus, now I don't know. I agree with you. I think that every one of them should be a concern. But, how do you determine a good heart in the first place?
Exactly. And what a lot of people will use, I've experienced a lot of criteria people will talk about, are they zealous for it? Well, that's good. Except that the Bible speaks about the danger of zeal without knowledge. Matter of fact, you're told that that's why the Pharisees crucified Jesus, was zeal without knowledge.
Zeal without
Paul said that's why he persecuted the church before he was converted. Zeal without knowledge. So zeal without knowledge can get a person into some very ill-advised places, places that are not good.
Yeah.
And going back to your janitor issue, the smallest jobs could bring down, something big going on. If a person, okay, I'm going to get really extreme, but if you got a janitor that doesn't clean the bathrooms and the health code people come in and say, hey, you know what, we're shutting this down until this place gets cleaned up. And yes, I know that's an extreme example.
Right.
But yeah, people start to say, well, yeah, but you're up front, so therefore.
Well, but they're among you.
Right.
They're among you. And so it's like, okay, depending on how you define a good heart. What if you had somebody like, I'm going to go to an extreme, okay? Satan worshiper
Yeah.
as a janitor in your building. Probably not something, you're still among the people.
Right.
There are people there, and
Right.
you're mingling with
Right.
them. Or an unrepentant person, someone that's unrepentant. Now, immaturity, I've seen musicians that are really, really, really good, and they're used by the church. So, and their character was off, and so they kept letting them rise within the ranks without checking their, their character in that they were.
Looking over the red flags or passing by the red flags.
Yeah. But you could do that with a janitor.
Sure you could.
Oh, just let him keep working here. He's doing fine. And then all of a sudden he robs the church.
Right.
Well, the piano's gone. And so's the janitor.
Yes.
I don't know.
Right. No, and you're exactly right. So yeah, and I do think there has become a thing that, music is, it's nice to have music. Well, first of all, let's go way back to the beginning. Lucifer himself, music was not just something he did. When you read, it was part of his makeup.
Mm.
So God instituted this music. When you go back to the Levitical order, God thought it was important enough that he took an entire tribe and said, this is your job. And only your job. When you get to David, so everybody, what the thing about David that God liked was his heart. Time out. The answer one of the servants said, behold, I have seen a son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite, that is cunning in playing, and the word means an instrument. So first thing identified is, man, the dude can jam. and that word cunning, we'll talk about that in a little bit, and a mighty and valiant man, and a man of war, prudent in matters, and a comely person, and the Lord is with him.
Hmm.
So he's listing out all these things. First thing he says, man, the guy's a good player. The biggest section in your Bible, the Psalms, we forget. Those are songs.
Hmm.
And God put them in our Bible.
A big percentage of the Bible.
A big percentage of the Bible. And even what's not in the Psalms, there are Psalms throughout the Bible and other places. And so there is something.
So, but some would argue that, okay, wait a second. I just had a little epiphany here. David was a king. He had a whole governmental system and still played music.
And was known as the sweet psalmist of Israel.
Okay, so the argument of, okay, I'm called to be a musician, but the church isn't paying me full time or respecting me as a musician.
The church wasn't paying Paul full time or respecting him as an apostle. And yet he still did it. And even writes a letter about it to the Corinthians.
Good. He's so good at this. I love it. You read the Bible 100 times, right?
I don't know how many times.
I love how you can just pull these things out. This is awesome. But no, that's good. So I guess for me, I played in the church for 20 years before I started studying with Phil. And so I had no idea what was out there, the value that was out there. And so I now consider myself a piano plunker before Phil. So I was just like, I was anointed,
right,
talented. I had some, God put me in some really prominent places at an early age, which, I still to this day don't understand why he did that, but he did it, and I'm grateful for that. I got to do a lot of really cool things. But now I'm beginning to see the value of focusing on a discipline. I feel in my heart that I'm a called musician. I don't understand. I'm going to be honest. I don't understand what I'm saying. I don't. It's so deep. I just know that that's there. I just know it's always been there, since I was little. And our family is musical. Our whole family. And I've really been, my eyes have been open to the discipline where it's okay not to be great at everything. Get rid of everything. Go down to one thing and master it.
Yeah.
And so if you have a lot of things going on and you're a called musician and you're saying you don't have time. Well, they're not paying me, so I don't have time. Well, I'm a full-time mother, which they say is 2 jobs. I'm running KCCM. I teach, which actually teaching makes you better. When you teach,
Absolutely.
when you teach right,
Absolutely.
you can't just teach the wrong things, that doesn't work. Because then, you're in, if you practice perfectly, not
a good teacher who knows or he or she doesn't know it all, as they teach, are going to learn things themselves. Phil talks about it. Our friend Phil talks about it. You talk about it. I've mentioned it. It's like you're teaching somebody. It's like you get a revelation through the teaching.
But you might not be called. There are people that I've led many worship teams. I feel called. Not everybody on my worship team was called to music. Sometimes they were necessities.
Right.
They were filling a place.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry, I'm sniffy this morning, but you see what I'm saying. So I get that. At the same time, when I led the worship teams, I said, look, no matter what reason you're here, I'm asking you to be committed. If you can't commit, and if you don't have a half an hour a day, don't commit.
Right.
If you don't have a half an hour a day and you're not a disciplined person, please just don't commit. I can just lead by myself. I would rather lead by myself. And I also put a community together because I really believe the relationships were important along with the music. It's not just about music. There's a relationship with God and a relationship with people. And if you can't get along with people, if you can't maneuver that, you can't maneuver this. You can't isolate yourself to just God. Because God is in you, so where 2 or more.
Right. Right.
The God in us is communicating.
Jesus in us is, yes. And it's the same thing when Jesus said, when you visit a person in prison and do all these things, you visit me.
Right.
The reason he says that is, and he's talking about your brothers in prison I'm visiting my Creator because he's in my fellow believer. And there's things we learn. God is so vast it takes all these people and all these personalities to reflect different aspects about him.
Right.
We forget about that. But even going back to the whole thing about calling, yes, it's good to have a sense of calling.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tell a quick story. Can I tell a quick story? I played on
Well, we're at the 15-minute mark, so we're going to take a break, and then we'll come back and you tell your story.
Okay.
Okay? Hey, we're back, and Rick's going to tell a story.
Yeah. So going back to this calling issue, I'm going to go to we used to have activities just to, get out and work off the testosterone and stuff. We used to have a softball league.
Okay.
And for those who don't know, I made it all the way to where I was being asked by scouting leagues to play. There was interest by professionals in me from San Diego to Chicago for Major League, yes, when I was 18 years old. And so I loved baseball.
Okay.
Well, long story short, years later, I'd play softball after all that was gone, and I'd get with men that enjoyed playing softball. I had one guy on the team, dear friend, and he says, oh, I'm a shortstop. And I looked at his build. I knew from baseball, because I learned baseball, you have certain strengths for certain positions, and you look for those strengths. And when he said he was a shortstop, he was insistent on it. And I said, okay, not sure I see it, but I'll stick you out there.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy made error after error after error, and he got so frustrated with himself. And they weren't like bad errors. It was just enough that he couldn't get the guy out, that kind of thing.
That's me on the drums.
Yes. So after I let him try this out and saw that it was a pattern, I said, hey, do me a favor. I said, trust me for a minute. I said, my background in baseball. Play second base. Can I put you at second base? Oh, I've never done second base before. I said, I know. Can I put you at second base? Will you try it?
Mm-hmm.
He said, okay, I'll try it. And he was kind of skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
Went over there and had the game of his life.
Wow.
And to this day, and that was back in the late 90s, to this day, he recaps, he said, man, second base, I'd have never thought it. That's the kind of humility that God's asking us.
Yeah.
I think some people get a sense of a calling, and God is saying, no, not really. If you humble yourself, let me show you. For example, now let me bring you to Paul. Paul has an encounter with Jesus Christ where Jesus tells him, you're going to be an apostle of the Gentiles. What people miss from that story is Paul doesn't immediately go out and go to the whole wide world and go to the church and say, hey, I'm the new apostle. Paul goes home for 14 years. Home. When the church at Antioch is really getting going, the Gentile church that's primarily made up of Gentiles, non-Jewish people, this guy named Barnabas says, you know what? I know a guy at Damascus. Let me go get him. And the reason I'm telling that story is people play with this thing about I'm called. Well, and then I've had people say, well, how do you know if you're called? And the answer is...
Is someone calling you?
The answer is profound. Is anybody calling you? And if they're not calling you, you might not be called in that area.
Ooh.
Yeah.
See, no one's calling me to fix their car.
Exactly.
No one's ever called me to fix their car.
Now, again, that doesn't mean that the minute you have a sense of calling, they're going to call you then. What I just said. Paul went home 14 years before the church of Antioch Barnabas come down there looking for Paul and say, hey, come up and help us.
Well, and like I said, I really feel like when I was 20, my natural talent took me far. It did. I mean, God has called me, so it took me far. But he put me in hiding for years. And then I started KCCM because I'm just like, well, at first I said, I got to do something. I had three babies in the house, and I'm just like, I'm an extrovert. I need people. But God orchestrated all of that for about 17 years, and taught me a lot, and I met a lot of great people. But one of the things that I learned in the last 8 years with Phil is that I am not as prepared for the opportunities as as
Correct.
I thought I was. So if there's a frustration out there, if I'm not being asked, but I feel called, your preparation might not be matching,
Back to Paul.
Yeah.
14, you know what Paul did? What he tells you he did when he was at home for 14 years? He shared his faith in his hometown. You know what that's called? Preparing and practicing.
Preparing and practicing.
He worked up his, what God was telling him, and he was sharing it and learning what he was doing and getting better at it. So bring that to the musical realm. Even in non-Christian circles, let's say Nashville. Nashville's known as a 7-year town. When somebody shows up and says, "Oh, I want to play here," most people, it's 7 years before they ever get their shot. You know why that is? Because they got to practice. They're getting better. They're practicing. And here's
probably waiting tables at the same time.
And
raising kids.
And here's the other part about it. People that are looking for talent in that business, you know what else they're watching that a lot of people dismiss? Consistency. Is this person going to stay with it? Or when I sign them to a contract, is their band going to blow up because they got issues and can't get along? Or
are they going to blow up because they can't get along with people?
Right.
Or people don't get along with them.
Correct.
Or however. I mean, you could be in the wrong place.
Yep.
Or maybe the right place for a reason you don't understand. I mean, I've been in 3 churches. I've served in 3 churches. The first one was really rough the first year. And then I got my footing and learned. I mean, oh my gosh, that was training ground. Then I was sent to this second church. I was there for 7 months. And I learned how to recognize cancer in the church. Quickly. I was just like, wow, okay, this is what it looks like, right? But I was completely hurt. I mean, as you're learning things, it doesn't mean it doesn't affect you.
Right.
You can, get in an accident, you learn, oh, okay, you're referencing the world. Sometimes there's consequences. And I know that I was out for about, after that particular church, I was out of commission for about 2 years, I'm like, what just hit me? And then the third church, I recognized a lot more than that. And I was there for 2 years before it was like this. I recognized how if people are going to accept what God is doing, I mean, not necessarily the style of music, you know what I mean? But are they holding on to what they want, or are they going to let go and grab what God has for them? It's kind of like I have this picture of Alex in a crib, and he has an empty bottle. In the morning, they have the empty bottles, and they're waving it like this. But if I take the bottle from him, he cries. He's like, you took the bottle from me. Not realizing I'm going to the kitchen to fill it up,
right.
And so I recognize that there, and where it's like, but they wouldn't even let go. They're like, this, no. And I will manipulate and I will make your life miserable so I don't have to let go of this. And so, it's kind of like pearls before swine. You just have to walk, I can't, you're not going to listen, and I don't blame, I mean, there's no hard feelings, but I learned to recognize things. And, and I had to do that myself. You have to let go. Okay, with certain things at KCCM, I had to let go so it goes forward.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
And it's the same with us musically. And I hate to randomly talk here a little bit, but this is going to another thought, and that is the old music, that we're used to. We like to be in our comfort zone. We like to, it's so funny with a guitar player. The first thing they do is, I don't know, Carry On My Wayward Son, Boston.
Yeah. Certain songs, yeah.
Certain songs, they'll just go right to them. And it's like, I get that, it feels good. But are you moving forward? Are you exploring your music world? Are you trying to be better at what you do? And so 8 years ago when I started with Phil, I went in thinking, I'm good. I was playing conferences at 20 and blah, blah, blah. So I went in, I'm good. He's going to love how I play. And so he didn't even bat an eye. He says, okay, nice. Okay, so go on. I'm like, go 1, down 2, down 2. He made me start from the raw beginning.
Yes.
Here I am. I've been to college theory classes, been playing piano since I was 3. And what did he do? And what does the Lord do? He brings us to
humility,
the beginning,
yes.
Your salvation, the cross. You know, when we get too full of ourselves, he brings us to the beginning. And that's what God did. And he's like, you missed some things along the way, and I'm bringing you back, and we're going to fill those details in. You are getting older. You can take this now.
And that's why it says resists the proud and give grace to the humble.
Oh, you have to be humble to learn.
Yeah.
You know,
and humility is I don't know
everything.
Humility is an aspect of humility is I do not know everything. Paul even said that.
But not only that, I had to have expectation that God was doing something in it, because sometimes we say, "Oh, it's too late."
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But no, it's not, for one thing.
Right.
You know, I tell you, I have a student that's only been playing a year.
Yeah.
She's never touched the piano, and she's already playing and understanding probably more than the listeners. Which I'm sorry, she just does in a year. She's 9, and she's playing a sonatina, and she's just doing quite well. But she is a natural musician, and she's hungry. She's like, give me more and I'll practice. Give me more and I'll practice. And she's diligent. And I sometimes creative people, I think, can be a little lazy. I don't even know if it's laziness is tired because of all their thoughts, but
but that
you know what I mean? Because I can get that way.
That goes back to that thing you talked about, disciplining, saying, okay, if God's called me to this, I'm going to donate, or I'm designate an hour or half hour, or whatever, a day to it. Read your Bible. Whatever you have faith that God has done, God says, okay, I'm going to check it. And so it comes back to, well, how do I know? Because people will get lost in a lot of this. Well, how do I know God's really in it? Well, my question is, if you said you believe God's in it and all the signs are there, but it's not going the way you thought, here's a thought. What's going to make you quit? What's going to make you quit? Because that's what God talks about in enduring faith. It's a faith. You'll hear a term in Christian circles, saving faith. How do I know if I have saving faith? Well, it's real simple. You're told how you know. It's never going to quit. It's going to go all the way to the grave with you. You're never going to give back up. Matter of fact, the Bible even teaches you, what about those people that said they were believers and fall away? What you're told is they never had saving faith to begin with. They were just testing the waters and decided they didn't like the waters, so they got out. They never fully said, yes, I'm following Jesus no matter what. And that's what happens. We've talked about it before. People that say every time you see them, oh, God's calling me to do this. And then next time that you see them, they've abandoned that. And, oh, God's called me to do this. And then next time you see them, they've abandoned that. And they're jumping all over the place.
Yeah, stay in one place for a minute. Yeah.
And there's a phrase that has been perverted that a lot of people don't know is an actual phrase. The phrase is, I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. What people don't know is that originated from an original phrase from Benjamin Franklin, who said, be a jack of all trades, master of one. And people, they don't master one because I believe in a lot of cases we're so scatterbrained that, squirrel, or, shiny. And so we run over there and we never master any one thing.
And are we, and what are we really, what is our real goal here? Is our goal to, and this is hard because we all like attention.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't like putting that part down because, my daughter's 14. She likes attention. You saw her last night. She wanted to be part of the action, right? So she's like interrupting and stuff because she wants to be a part. And so a little bit of us says, we want God to see us. I'm out there. I want you to see me. I want you to Daddy, recognize me. Yeah. I'm here, pick me up, pick me up. And I think that's more of it.
Sure.
I mean, on the other
There's
side.
that as well.
Yeah. On the other side, there can be some self things. But I really think at the core of our hearts as Christians, we just want Daddy to see us. And so it's hard because, and you know what? We're going to talk more about this. I'm going to take a break here, and we're at almost the 15-minute mark, and we're going to talk about that specifically. I'd like you to kind of answer that. So we'll be back. Hey, we're back, and we are going to talk about attention because, you know, as musicians, we play in front of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and having attention from people sometimes is having attention from God, you know, and we crave that, you know, Daddy recognizes. I'm not talking about being worshipped.
Right.
I mean, there are other aspects
Right.
where, you know, we depend way too much on the praise of men, and I'm not.
Correct.
I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about when you sit and you play, and all of a sudden you're picturing yourself on the stage and leading worship. That's not a bad thing, you know. It's when you get caught up in it, you know what I mean.
Well, and in the New Testament, here's another place that people throw around. They throw it ignorantly. Is you're instructed by Paul that to honor those who have the care of you. Now, that old Greek word honor means to literally pay them money because they're looking out for you. And he's talking about ministers who people want to be there for them at their, you know, whenever something happens. And I used to tell this when I was first got into ministry and was becoming a pastor. God, you know, people would say, oh, you know, I'd get calls in the middle of the afternoon. Oh, my kid's in the hospital. Can you come be there? It's like, well, no. I'd love to. I'll come later, but I'm at work.
Right.
I can't just leave. And it would lead to these discussions about whether or not a pastor should be paid. And my answer would always be, well, it depends on what you want. If you want me at your beck and call like that, then I can't have a regular job, but I figure I need to make a living somehow.
Right. Well, that's why I charge for teaching.
Yes.
I mean,
and so there's this issue. There's all this issue about whether you charge money and all that. And that's another issue. But getting into this whole thing about wanting attention, everybody, that is a built-in thing. People want to be acknowledged.
Yeah.
That's part of. It's part of. You know, they talk about you need three things to live. Physically, you need food, you need water, you need air. That's what you need.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? Psychologically, you need a sense of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're never acknowledged,
mm-hmm.
you don't have a sense of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
And
so how does a musician pursue that in a good way?
Okay, so here's the tough part of this.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit
It's
tough.
always tough.
When you go to Peter talking about things, Peter says, humble yourself under the mighty hand of God that he may exalt you in due time.
So we have to wait.
Yeah. Again, what are you waiting for? Let's go back. Would you put, you know, I used to drive a truck.
Mm-hmm.
18-year-olds can't drive a tractor trailer. You got to be 21. You know why?
And there's a reason for that.
There's a reason for that. You got 80,000 pounds of screaming vehicle going down the road. When things happen, you have to know how to respond.
Right.
There's a maturity level not in 18-year-olds that is more in 21 and up.
Right.
Therefore, they limit it.
Okay.
Same thing with walking with God and getting put into places. How many people have we seen that get become the instant success? It all goes to their heads. And then next thing you know, their life's full of problems. They got alcohol issues, drug issues. They're going places they shouldn't, doing things they shouldn't.
Well, and I've seen that in musicians in the church where they're put up on a high ranking, right, or authority, and they don't have the character to support it. And so what happens is they go awry, and then all of a sudden the church, oh, well, we need to restore you. It's like, well, if you would have been interested in this person before it happened, you know, because, I mean, I know prominent people where I saw it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I see it happening. Why aren't they doing anything or saying anything? Or maybe they did, but it's like, well, pull them out.
Yeah.
Pull them out, you know?
And here's
for their sake, not to say, oh well, he's doing this, but no, for their welfare.
here's another thing, and this goes even a step further than that. But the God of all grace, who has called us unto eternal glory by Christ Jesus, after that you have suffered a while, make you perfect, establish, strengthen, settle you.
So we're talking about suffering now.
Yep. So this suffering, and a lot of people, oh, you know, Jesus died so that I don't have to suffer. That's a half truth. You're going to suffer if you follow him. He promised you that. He promised me that. What I'm not suffering for is my own sin. He paid for all my sin. But I'm still going to have suffering in the world. And this thing of suffering, Paul writing to the church, would use the games, the Greek games, as his reference point. He said, look, these guys that run in these Greek games, he said, they do things with their bodies, they practice, they learn how to strive lawfully, and every one of them does it to obtain a prize, a trophy. And he said, if they do that to obtain a trophy that's going to pass away, we should do it to obtain the prize for the high calling of Christ Jesus. What has Christ called you to be? That comes back to the question. And if you don't know, I can give you a starting point. Start with being a saint.
Well, okay.
But that's another issue.
Here's the argument. Just in this vein, okay? Here's the argument that I'm seeing is that the only value, it's like it's a separation. The only value is like to have this spiritual relationship with God, you know, get into the word and ministry and all of that. But all the practical things in life, your job, your practical giftings and everything are over here, but this is what really matters. But I would argue that they're not separate.
Yeah, that comes from a Greco-Roman concept, not a Christian concept, a Greco-Roman concept of the separation between what is secular and what is spiritual. That was never something Paul dealt with. Now, people in the Bible will run to what's of the flesh and what's of the spirit. That's a different matter. You're told what the works of the flesh are in Galatians. It has nothing to do with your job or...
But that's what people think, oh, it's carnal.
Yeah.
You know.
So let's go back to the illustration about, you know, people want a pastor to be there all the time. Well, it takes money to run a church. So if you're going to tell me that the only giftings that are important are the child care people and all this, well, if your church needs money, I hope somebody's gifted there to be a businessman who makes some money so that he can give to what's going on.
Well, the ministry, the poor.
Correct.
You know, I mean,
correct.
What are we supposed to go in La La Land? And
right. Yeah. And so this leads into people run... Scholars through the ages have gone to the list in Romans and the list in Corinthians. None of them believed that was an exhaustive list of gifts. That was they were giving you examples.
Okay, so basically, like I said, you know, everybody so wants this relationship with God. I so want a relationship with God. I kind of look at my daughter. My daughter wants a relationship. I just want to spend time with you, Mom. I just want to spend time with you.
Right.
But I don't want to clean my room.
Yes.
You know, well, wait a second. You cleaning your room affects me.
Right.
Every time I pass it, your room's dirty.
Correct.
Now, I'm not talking about sin here.
Right.
I'm not talking about sin. It's covered, or sin is covered, right? But, okay, you want to spend time with me, but yet the house that I own, you don't want to manage. You know, it's like, well, clean your room, and then I don't have to walk by it. I'm not saying you have to spend every waking moment cleaning your room, but clean your room. You know, be good at living.
Yeah.
You know, do you have any scriptures on that? Or ideas about that?
That's where the passages that come in, and somebody on the conversation that was on the website or on the Facebook mentioned it when they said we are to do everything we do as to the Lord. Everything. Not just the spiritual stuff. Everything.
I mean, we still should have the...
Yes.
I mean, but I don't see them as separate. That's what I'm dealing with.
Right. It's not separate. It's not separate. Our entire life is... We are bought. We're told we are bought with a price. My entire life belongs to the Lord now.
Well, okay, there is a sense that, you are kind of, you roll with God. It's like, okay, he's calling me to this, and then today he's doing this, and today he's doing this. But there's also a balance of discipline in our lives, talking to him. I had realized that I had went a few weeks without,
Right.
I don't want to say prayer time, because I feel like my whole life is prayer.
Right.
But
It is.
But what it's like when your husband and you, or your spouse, you're so busy you don't sit down and have a conversation. So it's like, oh, I need to connect.
Well, prayer. Prayer. People think, I'm only praying when I'm saying something. Well, then how do you deal with the thing praying without ceasing? Never stop.
Well, but then you could just
okay. Well, now let me give you an illustration of what prayer in what the Bible talks about prayer. Prayer, you talking is only one side of the answer. So people talk about, I prayed to God. Yeah, but did you listen for his answer?
Right.
And a lot of people, I never thought of that. It's not just you coughing up.
So
what's
how
going on.
can?
So here's the analogy of prayer. The idea of prayer is if you and I go on a long journey together and we're talking back and forth, that's prayer. When we stop because we have nothing to say at that moment, we just sit there and enjoy each other's company, I got news for you. That's prayer.
Thank you. But my thing is back to discipline. Let's go back to discipline.
So back to discipline. Now the discipline is if you're called to something,
yeah.
If you really believe you're called to it, then you're going to work it.
Well,
that's what the Bible talks about, working out our own salvation.
Okay,
there's a work aspect to it.
The prayer thing is talking. So, that's why they used to say, I pray you.
Yeah.
And not just I pray you, I pray you.
Right. That's
because you're talking. It's a conversation. Yes. It's not just blah, 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 blah. It's an actual conversation. I pray you, da, 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 da. So, but the thing is you can have a discipline in that you make time,
yes.
Not a discipline that,
yes.
I'm just going to practice praying. It's a discipline I'm going to actually make time to communicate. It's like, Bob, I am going to sit down. Well, let's have a meeting every morning for 15, 20 minutes before you go to work and have some coffee
sure.
and talk about the day and what we want to do.
There's that
and
aspect,
then we go about our day and we do it well.
Yes.
And I noticed that sometimes we just go,
right?
But we don't think about our day. We don't talk about God about our day,
right?
And so then we just
right.
I'm not saying that watching and binging on Netflix is bad. I'm just saying that sometimes, it's our life, and we're just using it to we use it to escape, and we don't plan that time, not that what do you call it? Spontaneous is wrong, but you can't live there.
Right.
You can't live up here. And so, in La La Land, I'm talking about like in places of trying to, we do
right.
things to escape.
Well,
and so every day, it's like, I'll talk to Bob in the morning, you talk to God in the morning. It's like, what's this day supposed to look like? Well, I'm going to do my job.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it well. And then I'm going to practice. I'm going to, half an hour a day, an hour a day. If I don't, I have to do that.
Yep.
To keep sharp.
Yep. Yep.
And to keep above my students.
Right.
Am I being clear at all?
Yep. No, it's yes.
And, like so I'm rambling just a little bit.
People then want to take, going back to our conversation, people then want to take and say, oh, well, if you're just a musical hack and you want to be on the praise team, you should be allowed to be on the praise. Wrong. That is contrary to everything in this book.
And we're not talking about small groups that they have a small pool to pull from.
Right.
We're talking about circles that do have someone to
right.
things to pull. And then what the responsibility of both sides are. So what are the responsibilities of the church towards the musician?
Well, now you go into what exactly do you mean in that question? Their responsibilities.
Well, we had a post that says, it was kind of deep. They think there was somebody that had posted that thought that they should be treated as elders of the church. And that I don't really want to touch. I don't want to touch that. what I want to talk about is what is the responsibility of the leadership of the church towards the musician?
Yeah. So here we go. The whole thing about being an elder, there's one office listed that says, hey, don't let a novice hold this office, and that's the office of a bishop, an overseer of a church. Mm-hmm. And then it gives you the reason, because it'd be lifted up by Satan.
Is a bishop a pastor?
Yes.
Okay.
Bishop, elder, and pastor are all the same office. Each one of them are approaching. Bishop's talking about the oversight, overseeing everything.
Governmental.
Pastoring is talking about administering, caring for people, the care part of it. Mm-hmm. And elder means it's somebody it's not a guy that got saved yesterday that you're making the pastor of your church, because obviously everybody knows, can see the issues in that. The guy needs to have been tested and been around the block a while. And it even goes into that. He should have a good report of believers and non-believers alike.
Okay,
yeah.
well, I don't want to get into that, but that's good.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
So, but now then to say, well, a praise person, and I get where they're coming. Well, it's an important job, so you don't want somebody. Yeah, that's there's a grain of truth in that, but there is no thing in there saying, hey, only a seasoned elder can be one of these. There is not. It's not there.
You mean for music?
For music, it's not there.
Although they do have, I would say, if you put somebody on stage, you have to care for them. In that, if they're struggling and you're seeing that it's, they're putting. Yeah. A pastor should care for that.
Because let's go back to let's use some Old Testament.
I wish I could speak.
Let's use some Old Testament examples real quick. We're at 12 minutes. Old Testament examples is you had the entire seasoned army of Israel facing the Philistines. These are battle-tested warriors, and they're cowering in fear. And this little kid, young man, shows up and says, "What are you guys doing? Why is not this uncircumcised Philistine being put down?"
Right.
And one of the accusations come against him is like, "You're a shepherd. You don't know what it's like to be a soldier." And he makes the argument. It says, "No,
he fought bears. He fought lions."
Right.
Yeah.
He said, "I do have a past that God was with me."
Yeah.
And then they try to put on the armament and all that of Saul, and it doesn't fit.
Uh-huh.
And then so he says, I don't need all that. I'm going to use what I have as my sling, and he goes out there. My point about that is this kid came out of nowhere and did what soldiers that had been fighting for years couldn't do because God was with him.
So, okay, question. Was David symbolic of Jesus?
Yes.
Okay, so...
In many cases.
Think about this for a minute. Okay, he was tested in the fields, right? So he fought the lions and the bears. He was tested in the fields.
Yeah.
So then he's a musician.
Yes.
A good one.
Yes.
And you don't just... A lot of people, I think, get the impression that David just was born a good musician. I think he was talented and naturally anointed, but I think he practiced a lot.
The words used are the words skillfully, and then he said he was cunning at it. That word cunning means he was really good at it.
Right. So he was also tested in the field. So then when he went to battle, he knew how to protect his own fearlessly, basically. So. So it's a good model for us to say, it's like we're living in America, and of course we're not David and we're not Jesus, right? But we do have that model to look at to say that music is incorporated in everything. It is important. It's not a non-essential. It actually is probably a great part of the air of heaven.